Okay, ready for chapter 4. So it was back to the ranch and the same movie starring Rutherford all over again. But this time it was a boy, and I fell in love again. Perhaps he was only 3 weeks old, and therefore much smaller than Daisy, who was about 3 months when we captured her. We just picked him up like a Great Dane and put him in the bus. He drank milk and let me touch him right away. He seemed delighted at being caught. As the butterflies on Daisy's back distinguished her, his markings were hearts. He had a perfect one on his cheek and another on his shoulder. He looked like a valentine. We named him Marlin and took him home. We couldn't wait for poor little lonely Daisy, for whom we had gotten this friend to be with, to see him. Ooh, how's she going to react? Stiff from his ride, he wobbled into the pen and was overjoyed to see her. She walked up to him and kicked him hard. He tried to nuzzle her, but she kicked him even harder. She hated him. We were afraid she would hurt him, so we separated them by putting up a slatted fence. We wanted her still to be able to see and touch him, hoping she would come to love him. Oh yeah, look at those eyelashes. Wow. He tried so hard to be near her all the time, and all she did, now that she couldn't kick him, was ignore him, knowing he had to have someone to love and to love him back. And since Daisy was being so rotten, I took a little chair and sat with him all day, every day. I hung up a pretty curtain for him. He loved his bottle and being stroked and kissed. He had lipstick on his face most of the time, and being told how much I loved him. After a week of my concentrating my love on Marlin and his concentrating his love on Daisy, he must have said, "Ah, forget Daisy, I'll pick the ugly one. At least she loves him. At least she loves me." So Marlin imprinted on me. He also loved me because he thought I was a carrot machine. All he had to do was put his lips next to mine, and I ejected carrots into his mouth. When he was sure I was empty, he looked into my pockets to see if there were any more. Having transferred his love to me, he became overly affectionate, sucking my thumb for long periods of time, rubbing his face against mine, chewing my hair and my buttons. He always wanted to be with me and touching me. Pretty soon we were even eating leaves together. Well, I pretended to eat leaves because he didn't like eating alone. Since Marlin had someone who loved him, he was very happy. But Daisy was not. The day we released Marlin, he was just standing there on the lawn, minding his own business. All of a sudden, Daisy looked at him with a beady eye and charged the luckless little fellow, crashing into him with such a thud it nearly knocked him off his feet. Oh, poor little Marlin. He was so sweet and gentle, and had done nothing to attract her anger. Jock and I were shocked at Daisy's violence. We finally concluded that she was jealous of Marlin. She had undivided attention for several months and had grown used to being an only child. Now, although Jock still gave her milk and I went up to her a few times a day with carrots, we had been concentrating almost solely on Marlin. Ah, maybe some of you are connecting. Sometimes you get jealous if somebody gets more attention. What should we do about this? Send Marlin to the animal orphanage? Or was she like all children everywhere who are jealous of new babies at first? We decided to try just leaving them alone to see if she would get used to him. But the next day, Daisy got sick. She just sat in her pen all day and wouldn't drink her milk or eat her grain or leaves or carrots. She wouldn't even suck Jock's thumb. She had a high temperature fever. We had 6 different vets, but no one knew what was wrong with her. They'd never had a giraffe patient before and didn't know what medicine to give. Jock and I sat with her and talked softly to her for 3 days, trying to give her some milk. She just sat there behind her tarp and looked at us with sad, sick eyes and would not eat or drink. We were so worried. Then our friend, who had told us how important love is, said we were probably overfeeding her, so we didn't try to force her anymore. Sure enough, in a few days, whether it was because she had eaten too much or because she was certain we loved her, she got better. Isn't that crazy? The Daisy just pops in the window. But by now, Marlin was getting jealous. One day, he somehow managed to get his little folding chair I sat on in his pen around his neck. He ran around with it on as if he were carrying a school bag. Then he got lots of attention while we tried for hours to get it off. It was stuck. We let them both out together again, and for the next few weeks, Daisy ignored him. But she didn't kick him anymore. The horses began to steal the hay from Daisy's pen and eat it. So one night, Daisy followed Marlin to his pen so she could rest on soft hay instead of the hard ground. When she sat down next to him, he was so pleased he made funny faces for her and he nuzzled her. She looked at him a minute and then nuzzled him back. At last they were friends, and from then on they were always together, playing, sleeping, eating. Daisy and Marlin could tell time. At exactly 6 o'clock every evening, they went back into their pen, drooling for their supper. After we'd fed them and stroked them and talked to them, and they'd sucked our thumbs, they'd lie down and sleep. And even though the door was always open, they felt so safe and happy here. After a while, the horses lost their fear and came up while we fed Daisy and Marlin their grain. They began to put their heads into the pans. Daisy and Marlin seemed glad to share their food with them, and soon the horses were their friends too. Daisy and Marlin never left our property, but they ate almost all of our land. Everyone else has trees and shrubs that grow, but ours got smaller. Soon the gardenias and the other flowers disappeared altogether. What we had to do then was offer them a flower or shrub before we planted it. And what they didn't eat, we planted. If only they had something else to do except destroy our garden, I told Jack. To entertain them, I bought a big beach ball, which they kicked around the lawn, then destroyed our garden. One day, Jack brought home an enormous blow-up giraffe to see if they would play with it. But they merely walked up to it, sniffed it, walked over, and nuzzled us. They weren't dummies. They knew a real giraffe from a toy one. They loved us, and we loved them so much, too. They brought so much joy into our lives. We became concerned about the rest of the giraffe left back on our friend's ranch. You can't bring them all here, Betty, Jack told me. No, but we can move them to safety of a game park. So we got a giraffe sitter, sadly bid Daisy and Marlin goodbye for a few months, and then went to the United States to try to raise money to move the remaining giraffe to safety.